some things about me, just really quickly, and about where I am today, are that I am a former engineer. I love to build stuff. I also was an MBA student. I didn't finish my MBA because I switched into product management, and it was earlier than I expected, so it was a little bit, okay, let me just focus on that a little bit more. But I love to build things, and that really comes into the engineering background, but then also now in product management, you're trying to deliver something that can be useful. I've been in PM for more than 5 years in a few different areas, at like all the different layers of platform, applications, analytics, in a few different industries. And Kespry today, where I am, is a Series C startup, and we are focused on being able to work with all different types of visual data, what we call like pictures, videos, things like that, and being able to capture that and actually analyze it and making it usable for our end customers. So this was something that literally my first day on the job, I was handed this problem and had to work through it, and had 1.5 months to get to the actual release. So we're going to go through that and have it be interactive with everybody here. And then the way I tried to structure it all was based off of 2 key questions I tend to get a lot, which are that, number one, and especially for, like, we have a lot of people in the room here who are transitioning to product management. I get a lot of questions like, there's so many different tools and frameworks and terminologies, like how does all of that, first of all, come together? And then number 2, what are some important, like what does PM speak? So first I'm going to be covering, like I said, the whole development life cycle, but then also to make it easier, for example, for yourself, I forget, Hussein, that's right, and you started in the H. Like you were saying, you're about to start your rotation, so this is something that you can come back to and reference and research some more. So let's get into what is the situation. So like I said, this is something I started off with. What I'm going to be talking about is something that's pretty common across the board, which is, let's say that as a company or as a team, you already have a product that exists. It's really good for certain use cases, but then like you have customers who start using it for something else. And it might work pretty well for something else, but we just don't know if for that use case it's exactly going to be what to do there, because customers are hacking their way to hacking the product together for that. So now you have what's happening also coming in as a product manager. You're hearing that, all right, other teams, go-to-market teams, executive leadership is saying we should do this. As a company, we should go in this other direction. And ultimately, who makes that decision? You, right? So you have to come down to, should we actually build that? If so, should we really try to solve that problem? If so, what should we build and why? So that's what we're going to go through. So first part, I've broken this down into 2 parts. The first one is really understanding the problem. And I know we hear that a lot in product management, and this is something this is one of the ones I'm going to have the interactive session for. And then the second part is going to be more on the execution, and I'm going to go through that a little bit faster, but share the whole end-to-end is going to be our structure today. So on the first day, let's say you start at Kespry, like I did, and you learn that ultimately at the end of the day, one of the things our customers can do is that our customers can fly drones autonomously. We have the right flight planner to do that. So all the customer has to do is just capture that data by flying over a certain area. They want to be able to understand like the real physical state, like the current state of something or a location. You can capture this imagery here. We have like analytics that can run, and we process that data, and then now the end user at the company, at the business, can actually like use that data and analyze it. So let's just say that's what it is. And so you realize that, okay, it's very useful for, like I said, understanding the current state of something, and to be able to take certain measurements and do like what we call dimensional analysis. But like I was saying, the other thing that our customers and users are using this product for is more of the planning, being able to see, where were they before? How are they doing compared to what they were supposed to be doing, and where do they want to go, and be able to plan their business operations and things like that. So that's what they're hacking their way through. Should we really build more capabilities, or maybe even a separate product that helps solve that? So that's the little case study. So day 1, you know this, and your head of product says, all right, tell me, what are we going to do about it? So where do we start? And what questions would you start with? So I'm going to share where I had started off. So coming in, I was like, all right, so I have a few different ways I could look at this problem. I have a few different kind of things in my toolkit, and we're going to touch upon these different ones and how I use them throughout to actually ask the same types of questions and answer the same types of questions. So this is a lot of, these are examples. Literally, I pulled up my actual, like on the first day of my job, I listed all the questions I had. And I pulled up my actual slides from a year and a half ago to look at that. And a lot of it, what you were saying, are some of the things I was thinking about. Ultimately, it does come down to first step is speaking the customer's language, right? And empathizing. And we always hear that. But what does that mean? Well, it comes down to, like you were saying, what really matters most to them? Like what is it that they're trying to do? It even comes before even this problem of specifically what are they trying to like hack their way through. It's the bigger picture of in this case, it's an enterprise customer. So in this case, we will be looking at within their businesses, where are they making the money? Where is it that they are most focused? Where is it that takes up the most resources for their company? Something like that. So what are the value drivers for this organization? It can also be down to a person who, is trying to just do their, like some personal life kind of problem that they're trying to work through. Again, what is it that motivates them is ultimately what we're talking about. So a lot of these bullet points you're going to see is a lot of the product speak. So the other question was, okay, how does the user perceive and define the problem? We might interpret it a certain way, but how do they define that problem that they're trying to solve? And for which users and customers is it a problem? So this is where we hear those terms like, what are the use cases? Who are the user personas? What is the user experience? What are they feeling throughout this experience? What are the pain points, as we said? And what are the things like the target outcomes? What would make it feel much better? What would be that relief? The third one generally can be described as, okay, so what are they doing today to solve this problem? And what are the gaps? That's where it comes into, again, what is that user journey that they're currently going through? What is our competition? Where are the gaps, which means what are the opportunities? And then just looking at the bigger picture of everything else that the customers and users are using to solve their problem. The second part is now in more internal facing. This was the other set of questions I had was, okay, so are there others with a similar problem? This comes back to what we might hear as market size. What are the potential customer segments that we know of today, and who do we maybe not know about, and who can we expand to possibly? Again, this was all within the first week. I'm just trying to research this and get some sort of an idea, get that context, position myself, and start to have some sort of a hypothesis. And start to think about, okay, so it seems like this is the overall, what our businesses, our customers who are enterprises, this is what they might be dealing with. Perhaps if we can impact this one area where they maybe have the biggest pain points or the most revenue potential for themselves, if we can help them with that, maybe that will be useful. But and then here also related to ourselves is really for ourselves what matters most to us and what are our business goals. And then of course another question you really think about is, so what is it that, why should Kespry solve it, or why should our team solve this problem? Is there something unique about us? And we hear about what is that differentiation? And I'm going to go into that some more. And the last thing I was going to mention is that another key question I had was in the category of, similar to where we had Nate mentioned the willingness to pay, was also what is the barrier to entry? What kind of a problem does this need to be able to solve for a customer or user to really think it's worth it? So the two together are what allowed me to be able to try to answer that first question. Those two steps were to just even answer the question of, is this problem even worth solving? This is what you were saying, Kavi, is this even worth, focusing on? And so I used external data, like I've mentioned here, to be able to build up my case or answer my questions that I had on that first slide for step number one. I use internal data, like whatever I could get, like product usage analytics. We had some instrumentation to be able to see how our product is being used, which features are being used the most. Then also looked into who do we have in the pipeline from the sales side, of who we want to try to target at least. Whatever information I could get to understand, okay, what are our priorities as a company? I was also able to get our win-loss analysis type of data, which was if we did lose to a competitor, what was the reasoning for it? Which comes back to the question of who does our customer also see as our competition? Because we might be doing like market research and being like for example, Kespry started off as a drone in drones. You might think, okay, so obviously our competition is other drone companies and ones that process the pipeline. But no, actually, your competition can be existing like other software, even something that's not even technology. It is something that is a very basic tool that's used every day. So for example, in the insurance or inspection industries, the competition for drones is a ladder because you just need the roof inspector to just walk up there and look at it. For solar industry, right, for like planning out the panels, you can just have somebody be able to go up and measure it. So you have to think, how is it that our customers are evaluating our competition? Great, I had a hypothesis. Now what? So it's gonna be another interactive session. You're gonna have like 1 or 2 minutes to think about what would you do next. So what would you do next after this? So I'm gonna give it 2 minutes based off of the last time. So be able to get to a point where you can, a lot of it was interview customers, talk to customers, map the hypothesis to the data that's being collected, validate and invalidate what you might be thinking, be able to look at current state of what is the tech stack, what is the cost of delaying, development, how do you balance between what we might already be doing to what the needs are. So those are the types of things I heard. Look at the assumptions of the hypothesis, things like that. So this was I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing. So this is where a lot of the things that you all talked about, which was, now let's switch over to the primary research. This was where I started to use I'm a big fan personally of design thinking processes and user-centered design. And this comes down to what all of you were saying was talk to customers, right? And actually start to hear from them. And ideally, in any situation, ideally you get to partner with your users throughout the process. So in other words, when we talk to customers, not just this one time, but if there's a way to strategize, which is the second point, and partner with advocates, meaning within the customer base, or internally find champions with strategic accounts, or the target personas, the people the types of users you're trying to target. Again, this is consumer or enterprise type of customer base. And also like power users who may also be the biggest critics. So sometimes power users are great because you're like, oh, awesome, they love my product, but they're also very good at being able to find what are the things that are missing, or just things to consider that you may not think about. And then ultimately, one of the things that we also think about is the divergent to convergent thinking. So this comes back to what was being said about invalidating the hypothesis or validating the hypothesis. So you're trying to think, divergent means you're thinking of the big, allowing for lots of brainstorming, a lot of options, a lot of ideas, a lot of responses to a specific question. Convergent is then you use the facts to be able to understand it a little bit better. This is just one source, from one source I got, that explains the different steps of the design thinking process. You can either have it be just the inspiration bucket and ideation implementation, but within that breaks it down some more. But the point here is, again, what we kind of covered a little bit. We're still in this stage of understanding, observing, getting our customer's point of view. Then transitioning, and as you can see, it's very iterative throughout the whole process, is you start to transition to be able to start to come up with ideas, designs. Like we had some of it come up here, is that you might want to be able to have design solutions, validate some possible ideas. The idea of defining an alpha, being able to start to think in that way of how to make something testable. And testable means testing your product, testing your hypothesis, testing your assumptions, all those types of testing the designs for your product, all those types of things. So this, and then it comes back to now with, as you're iterating, being able to better focus in on what your position might be, what your story might be, what your business model might be for your product. So this is what I started next and was the next step. So what I did, like many of you were saying, in reality, I, with now additional team members, as I say, I partner with other folks across our company to aggressively iterate and gather new data. So I say aggressively iterate because I knew that we needed to be, if we were going to build something, kind of going back to, like, part of this was the, you know, being able to do that cost of delay and analysis. If we don't do it now, why is it that sense of urgency? Because I already knew that there was a goal that within 1.5 months or so, in 2 months, to get something out. We needed to be able to, if we were going to do it, we needed to do it now. And the reasoning turned out to be, it was one of the reasons was seasonality. Because if we miss this next, like if we were after those few months deadline, customers don't use the product that much anymore because for their business cycles, it's a lull period. It was like the end of the year. So other situations like in retail, Christmas time, Thanksgiving might be it might be very busy at that time. So you want to still release something by then because you need to have it be used, otherwise you're going to miss the cycle. So so I partnered with a few different folks to be able to start to make the plan for who we're going to interview, who we're going to talk with. And ultimately, in this iterative process, like I was showing before, it was to be able to iterate on the hypothesis and the assumptions, so to hopefully lead to, if we do indeed discover that these are real pain points, real problems, we can start to have our first kind of product positioning statement eventually, almost like an initial vision statement. So we had our initial hypothesis. The hypothesis would continue to evolve, hopefully, and allow for creating that. Another one was to really understand directly from our customers and users who are the people being most affected, meaning the personas, who are the ones that we can really bring the most impact to, what are the pain points, the opportunities we can have, and make an impact on, and ultimately what possibly the product could be. So going back to Aline's point as well about the alpha. So in design concepts, so divergent is when you have questions that generate, oh, sorry about that, I'm trying to get this out of the way, that's good. So divergent is where like you have questions like that you are trying to allow for all different types of brainstorming, anything is possible, any type of perspective is possible. And you might be using, for example, in our case, we use design concepts throughout the interview process to be able to just get the discussion going. So we had a few different ways. Actually, sometimes you can create your own concepts, but you can also use like other products that might be similar that come from all different directions to try to solve that problem, and you can be able to allow for responses that are more unfiltered. You can be able to allow for any type of discussion of what the potential could be, and then I get a variety of insights like mentioned. Convergent is as you get the answers and you get facts that are very clear facts, you are coming back to now refining what your perspective or position or designs might be. And then you're still questioning, getting feedback from customers, but you're not already like feeding the answer ahead of time. So that's divergent convergent. So that's why my recommendation is actually on purpose. Our head of design will be happy to hear this. On purpose, we start here at the max here in the beginning of our discussions. Do never show high fidelity, at least from our experience, my experience, because then that's exactly what happens. That's natural. That's the customers will be like, oh, so it's ready. Okay, cool. Like, all right, let's sign up for this tomorrow. And that's why like having the partners is good, and that's why like having actually a plan of like this one type of customer, they're always enthusiastic to just get going. So let's save them for later on when we actually are at this level of evolution of our designs. Let's save them for later. We're going to get their feedback, but some of the best discussions, this level of fidelity allows for a lot of that divergent discussion, where you can get just high-level feedback of, you can get a lot of different feedback. Because here, I don't know if you can see it, but the point here is that this was supposed to be like, I think if you're ordering food or something like that, placing an order for food, like a mobile app for it. Here, it's just on purpose, you just have boxes. This was actually the Nintendo teams. This is how they do it. They just have a piece of paper, and it just kind of has boxes and outlines for, you might have pictures here. The point here that you're seeing is you can choose what you want to order, and you can place the order. I mean, that's just the most basic thing, right? Like how nice the pictures are in that order, or if let's say that this was about this is about reviews of going to a place, but this is similar, like this is at an event and there's reviews you can have and things like that. When you have blanks on purpose, one of the questions we ask, and I took out this slide, but I had sample questions to ask, was something like, you would usually present this and say, okay, coming here, you can choose which event you want to go to, and then you could have different information about this event, and then you could be able to take the action of, whether you want to go there or not. What is it that you would want to know about the event? Or in general, you start off sometimes even of like, what do you like about the way you can get your information at an event, and what do you wish was different? Just listen, okay? And then they start to talk. And then you're able to delve into, okay, so when you say that you like how, it seems like it's easy to consume all this information at once because of how it's laid out, what is the information you want? And then they will start talking about, to your point, I think, was what are really the priorities? I think somebody said like, oh, no, sorry, Hussein, you had said, what are your priorities? Sometimes you can ask questions of like, if you could put anything on here, if you could understand anything about this event that you want to understand using this app, what would it be? You just leave it very open-ended. Mm-hmm. And so when it's already like this, it's already been solved for them. And it's hard to go backwards from there. It's hard to forget, oh, it's showing me reviews. Instead you just start going, okay, the reviews look good. Basically, we've gotten a lot of feedback now. Let's say that you got more clarity on the assumptions. You were able to validate parts of your hypotheses, get some other assumption out of the way. Now, what would you, to be able to define what the product should be, how would you start to think about the data that you got from users of what they like, what they need, what the pain points really are, what is it that they're trying to solve for, who are the personas that really need to be impacted? What would you do next to help you define what the product should be? Basically, first, I want to share one more thing, that this is what we know now, right? We were able to, from our research, determine what our vision product positioning statement could be. So we have like our first version of it. So we have our persona, going back to everybody's point of who are we trying to maybe focus in on, who are we prioritizing, what is it that we're prioritizing as the outcomes we want to impact, and what are the benefits that we really are saying we need to be able to make impact on. So here, we should be very specific, make it measurable, and everything should center around this. So this this is a reflection of what the research has told us is probably what should be prioritized. However, to do that prioritization, the reason prioritization is important is because we need to know what exactly are we building, and also at other times it's very important to know what are we not building and why, which goes back to Moko, you were saying, cut it down, and Nate, of like until it's the smallest thing that you have. And so having that clarity is very important. And there's so many different ways to prioritize. So I'm sharing two things. There's this really interesting, the periodic table of prioritization techniques that I like. And then there are a few other prioritization methods that I also saw over here, I think by, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it perfectly, but by Heiger. And but there's so many different types, and you can even make your own. But the way, some examples that I have used and I've used whether at Kespry or elsewhere, I'm going to share two of them. One is very analytical. This is RICE, the RICE method, and it captures some of the things that many of you mentioned, which was, okay, so let's say that, so right now we're in the process of evaluating what, for this product, for this use case, a few different combinations of potential features or capabilities. I'm not going to call it feature yet because we're still defining it, but certain capabilities we want to have. As to your point, who are the actual real potential customers that we might be getting? What is the value, the revenue potential from those deals that we really think are directly related to them? And what is the timing of those deals? It kind of gives that sense of urgency, that sense of, okay, if we don't get this out, we might lose this potential revenue here. This is just the actual numbers. This is quantitative. It's something that we can track and we can see. Here, if we were to build it, what might be our competitive position against our competition that we identified a while ago? It might be like, where does the competition come in? Like, how do you take that into account? And these were things that I personally added to the RICE model. The RICE is about customer reach, customer impact, the confidence in how much we think we can make this reach and impact, and then what is that effort? And there's a few different ways you can expand out the effort part as well, which went back to like feasibility and liability. So customer reach is about, one of the points that was made is perhaps the number of customer segments you can reach, or the number of customers within a specific segment you can reach. But it's about that breadth. Impact is how deep is going to be, it goes back to what is that value going to be driving. And so you could have it be that you have like a 1 to 10 rating system and a separate criteria for what 1 to 10, like each of the parts might mean. If you want to use a different type of numbering value, that's fine. Obviously, it just has to be consistent throughout. Confidence, like I said, means based off of your research that you just went through, and as you're gathering more information, what is the level of confidence? Like, for example, like someone, like it was mentioned, is in the process of asking customers, what their priorities would also be. It seems like that the reach could be high for certain segments or certain customers, but it's not so much for others, so I'm not sure. So I'm going to put it as a certain amount. Here's where we can start to pull in internally, perhaps that, technical feasibility, like it would require a whole lot of like, new technologies and new effort. And it could be a lot of times this works really well with a lot of the engineering teams that use the story mapping or points, t-shirt sizing. You can translate that here, so it's not like engineering is having to estimate again what it is. So it makes it really usable. But many times when you think about a product, many times one of the mistakes that sometimes can be made is you stop it at where the engineering needs to be. Sometimes every time I like to take into account marketing, customer success as well, basically the whole go-to-market end of it as well, to make sure it does get adopted. Sometimes a new capability that you're going to have, it's actually not that hard to build, but when it comes to ensuring that customers are enabled, they're able to be self-sufficient in using it, that might require some additional effort up front. So you want to take that into account. But the RICE model is basing it off of the engineering effort, but you can also do it based off the total effort if you would like. But this is an example of how I translated all that research of getting the empathy for the customer, for the users, being able to understand what the real problems are and make it quantifiable. Another method that's very simple and that can be used every day for like more complex or more smaller short-term prioritization is Moscow. And this is where you have, like, you might hear the terms must have, should have, could have, won't have. And many times that gets translated into how things are prioritized. And also, like in JIRA, many times like highest would be must have, and should have would be, high or something like that. But many times this is very useful, again, for agile teams
It works well with corresponding with how like engineering teams might be t-shirt sizing and things like that. So it helps, it allows quick grouping of different features and different feature sets, however you want to define this for. And then many times, many teams think of it as, okay, so for a certain timeline, the must-haves are going to be part of MVP. Or the should-haves could be in the next, what's after. And I just put some terms together, like MVP is a popular term that's been around, of course, for a long time, and we know what that means, but something else that's been in the product management space is minimum lovable product. So that goes back to like, how do you delight your customers? Minimum marketable is different from minimum viable. Minimum marketable is what really is people are going to pay for, right? So that might be a combination of must-have and should-have, for example. So it allows for easy categorization and grouping, but it also could be that's not data-driven. It could seem not data-driven enough. It could seem even more that, it's like subjective. But that's why, as a PM, you need to make the conscious effort to define what each one is. So for example, we might have it be that now must-haves are, it has a direct correlation with the customer deal. I'm just making it up. Should-have is something that removes blockers for an existing capability and workflow that our customers have, like a primary workflow of our customer. So you can define the criteria, but everybody has to be on the same page. We went through all this effort to define what the product is going to be. We went through all this effort to be able to make sure we have clarity on why we're trying to solve what we're trying to solve. Now to build it, had to translate what we just did to understand the customer pain points, to define the product vision, now had to communicate to the rest of the company. So in this case, what's most important is communication, being consistent, having it be always centered around the problem we're trying to solve and the persona and the user we're trying to solve for. Having it be data-driven. There are many different ways that you can make it feel data-driven. It doesn't just have to be like you were asking, it doesn't just have to be dollar value, it can be any other way to be able to make it comparable. Any way that it shows that there is ability to be able to measure the impact that's going to be made. And sometimes just simply using the actual user's language, the qualitative data that we captured, is very, very powerful to help the engineering team understand why we're trying to build something, or help the marketing team understand who to target and what might be required in their sales enablement. And then being continuously having the bias to action. So you can't just, sometimes product managers get the bad rep of like being too much with the head in clouds. Awesome, I set the vision, it's cool, it's awesome, we're gonna get it done, it's gonna be an awesome product, we're gonna get it out there. But if you're not actually proactively making sure that there is continuous clarity for the teams who are building it, it is understood what we need to do. As soon as any blockers come up as a product manager, just try to get that out of the way. Blocker meaning, I personally feel as a product manager, if the engineering team, design team, other teams don't have enough information to do their job, and they don't feel comfortable coming up to me, or I haven't provided that even after they've asked me, I'm not doing my job. Like, that's not fair. So that's what I mean by remove blockers. Quickly, if they're asking for information, try to provide that. And have your eye on the whole end-to-end life cycle. We just really kind of started here, but there's all of this that leads to a successful product launch or release, and adoption especially, and have very clear roles and responsibilities for within your teams. And so the tools to do that and I'm just going to let you all read this, but is around aspects, especially at a startup. At larger companies, might have project managers, your program managers. But what I did to do all the things I mentioned previously, have that clear communication, have the ability, have the bias for action, was had a kickoff to explain that product positioning statement, that vision. Did a bottoms-up estimation where with the user stories, engineering had estimated, but also we did estimations of the marketing effort, the customer success effort, the sales effort. What does the product data analytics team need to instrument the product so we're ready to start measuring? What is our dashboard going to be? So estimating that whole end-to-end effort, and then actually having weekly syncs all together with everybody, with the lead for each function, that just helped get the blockers out of the way. And then I was, of course, very much diligent, had to be diligent about how the requirements are communicated. And then when it came to actually after building, using both internal and external testing as much as possible. So many times those customers that were part of the iterative process, the design process, they were also testing at the very end. And we also included some new customers, like, you know, for your example, where like the ones who are like, oh yeah, I want to use a product now, looking at the high fidelity designs, they might be good to put into beta testing, for example. And was just very hands-on with the enablement, go-to-market enablement, and then ultimately having the right success metrics, defining that. That is actually very important. So this whole part might be another session that I'm considering doing, but I wanted to just show how it all relates back to the business goals, what was defined, what research you had done, and all that. So the end result was our first feature set was, you saw a picture of what's happened. So let's say like a drone flew over a site, and now customers were able to get an understanding of what their current state is, which was already what we could do, but you couldn't see it like this. You could compare it to something in the past, you could compare it to something in the future, you could quickly get your calculations of how you're doing, and again, we don't have to go into like what exactly everything means, but the point is that the result was 40% of our existing customer base adopted within the first 3 months, which was the most we'd had for an enterprise customer, B2B customer base and B2B product. And these are quotes from our actual customers who said that it's a big step forward, or kudos to whoever dreamt this up. So as a product manager, these are things that make you happy to see, but it wouldn't have been possible in this case without the effort that we just went over and kind of worked through together.